Imagine a king so fearless, so fierce that an entire empire dreaded his name. We're about to dive into the story of a ruler who didn't just stand up to the world's biggest colonial power. He armed his soldiers with a weapon that would literally change the face of warfare forever. You know, for the British, who were expanding their grip all over India, Tipu Sultan wasn't just another local ruler. No, he was a serious strategic threat. The guy led massive armies, he built alliances, and he was always innovating, which made him the single biggest roadblock to their ambitions in the south. And this quote, it just sums him up perfectly. Better to live one day as a tiger than 1,000 years as a sheep. For Tipu, this wasn't just some nice-sounding phrase. It was his code, how he lived his life. This whole Tiger of Mysore identity, well, it defined his entire reign, his wars, and ultimately his fate. So where did this tiger even come from? Well, Tipu Sultan was born back in 1751, and he wasn't just born into royalty. He was born into a kingdom that was constantly at war. His father, Sultan Hyder Ali of Mysore, was a brilliant military commander in his own right, and you better believe he was grooming his son for greatness right from the very beginning. And listen, this was not your typical royal education. He learned multiple languages, including French, specifically so he could talk to Britain's biggest rivals. But he was also deeply trained in the arts of war, strategy, modern weapons, the whole shebang. It was the complete package for a warrior statesman, designed to create a leader who could outfight and outthink anyone. Get this, at an age when most kids are just starting their studies, Tipu was already a seasoned commander, leading troops on the battlefield. His training wasn't in some classroom, it was a literal trial by fire, and it forged him into one of the sharpest military minds of his entire generation. And man, would he need every single bit of that training. His entire life was basically defined by a series of huge, monumental conflicts against one enemy, the British East India Company, and they were relentlessly pushing to take over South India. The fight against the British was this constant tug-of-war. Tipu was right in the thick of all four of these wars. He saw major victories, he even forced the British to the negotiating table after the Second War, but he also suffered some really bitter defeats, and all of it was building up to one final epic showdown. Tipu was an absolute master of classic military tactics. He knew the land like the back of his hand and used it to launch these fast, surprise attacks that just wrecked the British forces. But the thing that truly terrified his enemies wasn't his cavalry or his cannons. It was something else, a secret weapon they had never, ever seen before. And this is where the story gets really interesting. It takes a huge technological leap. We're not talking about simple fireworks here. We're talking about a revolutionary piece of military hardware that caught a global empire completely and totally off guard. So what was it? What was this game-changing invention that struck so much fear into the hearts of hardened British soldiers? It all came down to one brilliant idea: iron casing. Before Tipu's, rockets were kind of flimsy, made of paper or bamboo, really unreliable. But by packing gunpowder into strong iron cylinders, his engineers could pack in way more propellant. That created higher pressure, which meant incredible power and range. It was a genuine world first. And their capabilities were just astounding. These things weren't just projectiles, they were weapons of psychological warfare. Just imagine it. Lines of soldiers marching in perfect formation, and then suddenly they're getting hit by these screaming rockets that could carry explosives or even have swords tied to them. It caused absolute chaos and broke their disciplined ranks in an instant. 2 kilometers. Let that sink in. In the late 1700s, that was an unbelievable distance for a weapon like this. It let Tipu's army hit the British from way beyond the effective range of their own guns. They couldn't even fight back. And here's the ultimate proof of how effective his invention was. The British didn't just find a way to beat the technology, they studied it, they reverse-engineered it, and they flat-out copied it. Tipu's Mysorean rockets became the direct ancestors of the Congreve rockets the British later used against Napoleon. His innovation literally went global. But even groundbreaking technology can't hold back the tide forever. In 1799, the British were determined to get rid of Tipu once and for all. They mounted this massive invasion, the fourth and final Anglo-Mysore War, and laid siege to his capital city, Srirangapatna. On that last day, Tipu Sultan proved he really was a tiger. When the city walls were breached, he didn't run, he didn't hide. Nope. He rode right into the thick of the battle, leading the defense himself at the main gate. He fought with unbelievable bravery, right up until the very end.
As he fell, mortally wounded, he became the living embodiment of the words he lived by. He chose a warrior's death over a life of surrender. He died not as a captive, but as the Tiger of Mysore, with his sword still in his hand.
Now, Tipu's death was a huge turning point. It basically opened the door for complete British dominance in southern India. But his story and his influence, they didn't end there. His legacy is incredibly complex, and it reaches far and wide. I mean, look at his legacy. Militarily, he's basically the father of modern rocketry. Politically, he was a reformer who modernized his kingdom's economy and how it was run. And culturally, he's become this timeless symbol of defiance against impossible odds. And what's so important to remember is that long before the big independence movements of the 20th century, Tipu Sultan was waging this relentless, lifelong war against colonial expansion. And for that, he is absolutely revered as one of the earliest and fiercest champions of Indian freedom. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to think about, right? What if his rockets had turned the tide in that final battle? What if the Tiger of Mysore had actually defeated the British for good? It's a powerful reminder that history is often decided by the absolute narrowest of margins.